Kurtzman. He is originally from Illinois, US, in the United States, but he's been living in Barcelona for 20 years. He and his wife have two children, Jack and Emma, and they were both born in Barcelona. Rich is the founder and CEO of Barcelona Study Abroad Experience, or Barcelona SAE, and author of Like a Fish in Water, How to Grow Abroad When You Go Abroad. Rich, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure. I really enjoyed speaking with you before the show, and I'm excited to share with our audience everything that you have to say. So let's kind of start with your family. Why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. So I am married to my wife, Carrie, who is English. She's from England, but hasn't lived in England for at least 20 years now. She was in France for a year, sort of doing a study abroad there, and then moved to Portugal and was in Portugal for 2 years teaching English before she decided on a whim to move to Barcelona. Had never been here before, just thought it sounded great and came here, and that's where we met, luckily. And so that was about 18 years ago. And now we've been married for a long time. We have the two kids, like you mentioned, Jack and Emma, that are 9 and 7.
Wow. So on a whim, she moved to Portugal. I love that. That's definitely a different mentality.
Yeah. She was in Portugal for 2 years and then thought, I'm done with Portugal. I'm going to go somewhere else. Didn't speak Spanish at the time, or Catalan, which they speak both here in Barcelona. And thought, well, Barcelona's got great weather. I've heard good things about it. It's got the beach. Let me try. And she said she had a friend of a friend living here. And so she knew somebody where she'd get a house, a room to rent. And that friend of a friend happened to be my friend that lived down the street.
Oh, there you go. It's meant to be.
Through there. And yeah, we actually had a sort of first date with other friends at the archery bar in Barcelona.
Okay.
Which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a bar that you have your cocktails and you have a bow and arrow and you have targets at the end, like a dartboard, but further down with plexiglass lanes, and you compete against your friends, take a drink, and then shoot a bow and arrow.
That sounds like a dangerous combination. I mean, it really
can tell
does.
you it doesn't exist anymore. So I think something must have happened. Health and safety rules are very different here in Spain than we're used to in the US. It was a fun place, but probably not the safest.
That is funny. Okay, so now I know you. I mean, your wife is used to traveling as well, but we'll get into your story about your travel experience as well. But with your kids, you've still traveled with them as well, to quite a few countries. Where have you traveled with your kids?
Yeah, so my son, Jack is 9.5, and he has 10 stamps on his passport, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And considering COVID has hit us all over the last 2.5 years, he's had no stamps the last 2.5 years. So all of those came before he was about 7 years old. So he's been to, I think the furthest away we took, he and Emma, was to Australia for 3 weeks. So Jack was about 3 and Emma was just under 2 years old. So we got that free flight. That was important.
Take advantage of those. Yep.
Yeah. And for some crazy reason, we decided to fly 24 hours over to Australia, but it was amazing. Such a great trip. Met up with some friends there and traveled around to 3 different cities, and loved it despite some of the hardships, as you can imagine, with 2 little kids. Been to the U.S. several times, of course. I'm from Chicago, and so we go back there. We've been there. We also lived in Fort Collins, Colorado for 3 months.
Oh, okay.
Just with Jack. That was when Carrie was pregnant with Emma. And then she took them by herself, took Jack to Canada, where she has some family. Of course, we've been to the UK, and then France is only 70 kilometers away. And so easily have made it to France. We took them to Italy. On the way to Australia and on the way back, we stopped in Dubai. So we spent some time there. We've taken them to Portugal and then Germany for a weekend and around Spain. And, when you live in Barcelona, it's so easy to travel to other European countries and then US and UK, because we have family there, and Australia was the big one.
Must be nice having family in other countries, though. I mean, now I know you spend your traveling time a lot going back and forth. I know you go back and forth to the States, and but it must be nice just to stay with family, because a lot of people, that's one of the things that keeps them from traveling out of the country, right? Is how you afford it. So when you have family in other countries, I imagine it's nice to be able to stay with family and save on that expense.
Sure, family and friends, because it's the expense and it's also the babysitting. right? When they're
Yes.
tired and exhausted as parents. And if there's other kids around, they can play with other kids. And especially if those kids are from other cultures, they're learning, even if they don't realize it, if they're young, they're learning that there's a different style of life, different way of doing things. The things that they see with the families over there, the eating habits, the toys, the sleeping habits, all that is different. And so I think it's great to expose them to those differences even at an early age.
Definitely. And I actually do want to touch on this. We'll come back to it, but I do want to kind of speak about that experience to Australia, because I remember you saying like it was so difficult, but it was so worth it. So I wouldn't mind touching on that, just because I like to remind people that all the guests that come on my show are not saying it's necessarily easy to
Right.
travel with kids abroad, just that it's worth it and that the kids are learning things. So I wouldn't mind touching on that. Before we speak about that, though, I think it's really interesting. You also have who else is living in in your house right now?
Yeah, so several other people. So first of all, my mother-in-law lives here as well. So she's English, and she decided to retire from England and come live here, and so that's another multicultural aspect. But for the last 6 months, we've had a Ukrainian refugee family living with us, and that's been fantastic experience all around. It's a mother, her teenage daughter, and then a son who's the same age as my son, and they went through pretty horrendous trip to get here, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
leaving everything behind. The older son is still in Ukraine. The father of the children is still over there as well. The mother of and the grandmother is still there living in their house. Um, Despite that, I think they're having a good experience here as well as can be. I mean, their kids are in, integrated. They're in school. The daughter got a job this summer at a cafe. They're learning Spanish. They're learning Catalan. They're learning English with us.
Wow.
I'm sure we'll get to this, but I studied Russian when I was in school and studied abroad in Russia, so I can speak some Russian to them as much as I can remember after all these years. And so I think that for them, and because we've traveled so much, we've I think it's just been pretty easy overall. And our kids, when we said that we're bringing them in, they're like, oh, okay. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not. They've learned some great life lessons. They've had to share their toys. They've had to share their family, their mom and dad. They've had to share their life, really. And they've taken it in stride and learned what I think is a really valuable lesson, which is when there's people that need help, you help, you do what you can to help. And so they've just said, okay, this, I guess they think it's normal, right? That, yeah, okay, we're gonna have 3 people living with us for the next, we don't know how long. And
Yeah.
it's been great. Yeah, we share. We just had dinner with them now. They'll make Ukrainian food. We'll make our food. We share around the house. And the son is playing basketball with my son, and the daughter's doing great. It's really, really a neat experience, of course, despite all the hardships.
The circumstances, yeah. I just love that you've done that, and I love that your kids, well, I mean, and you guys as well. It's not just the kids that benefit, right? The adults benefit as well, but all the different cultures that you guys are surrounded by. I mean, you have the American culture, the English culture, the Spanish culture, now Ukrainian. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
what I mean, it must be so your kids must be learning so much, and what an experience for them. So I think it's great that you guys have done that, and I think it's so rewarding for everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're appreciative as well, but that's wonderful. Okay,
Yeah, I love it. I love being surrounded by languages. And so in any
yeah.
given day or any given moment, there's 5 languages floating around. And when we have friends over, they've got friends over, then who knows what other languages are thrown in there. I mean, Carrie speaks Portuguese and French as well from her time abroad. And so I love that. And it's something I didn't get so much in the US.
I was just gonna
Um,
say I'm very jealous because Americans don't typically know more than one language, right? I mean, we learn it in high school and we don't really learn it. And so to hear you speak all these languages, it's like you're an American and look at you, but you live in another country, and that's
yeah.
definitely you're surrounded by it. And you studied it as well, but I just love that. And I love that your kids, because your kids, what languages do your kids speak?
Well, we speak English at home, but they have little British accents from the mom. Uh, and they speak Spanish and Catalan at school, and then mostly Spanish with their friends or with some of our friends. I wouldn't say they're fully trilingual yet, but they'll get there. I mean, English, yes, and the other ones they can understand almost everything and get by in the other ones.
And tell us real quick, because I was not aware that there were different languages within Spain. So can you really briefly
Mhm.
tell us what Catalan is?
Yeah, sure. So Barcelona is the capital of Catalonia, which is one of the 17 autonomous regions of Spain. You can think of it almost as states from the
Okay.
United States. However, there's a lot more history here than we have in the US. And so Catalonia for a long time was autonomous, and so it's developed its own language and has its own set of governments as well. And so the official languages in Catalonia are Spanish and Catalan, and there's about 9 million speakers of Catalan. So that's in this region here. Then there's a big part of Spain that really is Castilian, Spanish. Northern part of Spain will speak Basque language, which is very different from any other language. Catalan and Spanish are very similar. They're both Romance languages. And then you have Gallego or Galician, which is in the northwest region, and that's also similar to Spanish and similar to Portuguese, but official languages. And most of the time, almost everybody in Spain will speak Spanish, and then some people also speak their other language.
Yeah, thank you. Because I imagine I'm not the only one that didn't realize that there are different languages spoken throughout Spain. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a lot of countries like that we just don't know, and that's why I love to have guests who have been in other countries who can educate us. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I have so many things, obviously, that I wasn't even planning on going that direction, but I just realized that would be really interesting. So thank you. Before we kind of move on, because I do want to touch on how you ended up in Barcelona, I do want to briefly go back to that experience in Australia with the kids that we mentioned. So again, I just want to remind our readers that, or our listeners, excuse me, that you are not focused on this is easy, that's why we do it, but it's what the kids get out of it. So can you tell us, because I remember you said it wasn't an easy trip.
Yeah. And I would say what the kids get out of it, and it's also what we get out of it. And it's easy
Yeah.
to say, oh, I'm just going to stay home and not deal with the hassle. But like you said, it's just so worth it once you do it. And we were actually very worried about this 24 hours on the flight with
Yeah.
kids, with young kids walking up and down the aisles and screaming. And the flights were the easiest part because they have a screen in front of them.
Yep.
And although we try to limit their screen time at home when you're on a flight, you just like
I don't
whatever it
care. Doesn't
takes,
matter.
whatever it takes, let's survive. Eat, sleep, and watch TV. That's fine. And so the flights were okay. It was the jet lag that was killer
Yeah.
because, like I said, it was 24 hours of flights, and then the time difference. I can't remember exactly. I think it's about 11 hours from here, time difference. And so little kids don't realize that they're feeling exhausted at 10 in the morning because of jet lag. They just don't understand that.
Yeah.
And so we've got some great photos and videos of them with breakdowns and meltdowns, and they didn't understand it. But it took a week or so, and then they got over it. And then the experiences there were just fantastic. Like I said, meeting up with these our friends that have had kids about the same age, seeing things that they wouldn't see normally, just being on a different schedule, right? Not having the same routine every single day, so that they learn to be a bit flexible. And for us as well, we wanted to see it and do it, and we're not going to wait till they're 18 to go and do these things. So it can be done for sure. There'll be ups and downs like anytime, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, and I think you and I were speaking before. It's now you laugh about it, right? It's
Yeah,
and now
yeah,
all you focus on are all the memories that you have together as a family.
yeah,
So it's like, yes, it can be difficult. And yeah, it was kind of a tough week, but it was so worth it because of everything you got to see and experience. And you know what? Your kids did fine on the I mean, they made it on the flight. It was,
yeah,
it's kids are adaptable. And actually another mom I was speaking with
yeah,
is like, I want parents to know that kids are adaptable. They can make it work. It's also how you handle it too, right? And your kids are
yeah.
gonna feed off of that.
We laugh at it, look back and laugh now, and we had to laugh at the time too because otherwise we would be
Oh, that's
crying
great too.
all the time. And just like when they're having a meltdown in the middle of a supermarket, just like, okay, this is temporary. We know what is caused by. They'll get over it. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
great life lesson to have for travel abroad as well, because even adults that go abroad have culture shock issues and issues that they have to overcome. So with the kids, it adds that extra layer of fun.
Yeah, and it's funny because you made me think of when I traveled with my son for the first time in Australia, and it was like we had a long layover, and we had all. I'm like, oh my gosh, and I was by myself, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? And I was worse than he was.
Yeah,
He adapted better
yeah,
than I did. And it was like, you know, I'm so glad I pushed myself to do it because he surprised me, and I'm the one that worked myself up thinking about how bad it's going to be. And he was
yeah,
fine. Like you said, had the screen time he doesn't normally get. He was good to go. And he thought it was
yeah.
great.
They
So,
they could play in an airport, on the floor, just running around. Or
yep.
sometimes airports have their little kids things, or get a little toy from the shop, and they're happy. Yeah, and I think they would feed off of our stress if they would
Yes.
feel that
Yes.
stress. So you just know it's going to be tough. We're going to get through it, and you just do the best that you can.
And I think it's because so when we travel, no matter where we go, whether domestic or international, my son has a suitcase and then he has his toy bag. And it's like, go pack your toy
Yeah,
bag, whatever you want. And now he knows whenever he travels, he knows I need my toy bag. And I think when you travel, you just get used to like normally I wouldn't let you climb on the floor. Normally I wouldn't let you
right.
watch TV so much. But when we're traveling, you know what? Go for it. Have fun. He's crawling
Mm.
on the floor. And overall, it's like we stay to an area, but other people sitting in the by the seats, they don't necessarily care. They're glad your kid's happy too. So,
Yeah,
you know,
and good. Well, two things was this good for you for traveling alone with a child. I mean, that at least Karen and I had each other, and when one of us was just exhausted, the other one could jump in. So that is fantastic that you did that. Um, and also, what I find really fascinating is how other cultures view children. Right, like when you're in Italy and your kids are running around a restaurant and making noise, and everyone there's like, "Oh, look at the bambino," they like it. Whereas I find sometimes in the US, if our kids are making noise, we get
oh
dirty
yeah.
looks in restaurants, and why can't you take care of your kids? We have some friends in Italy that had, so he is English and his wife is Italian. They've got two little kids, mostly growing up outside of Rome. And they say that when they're in Italy, in Rome, their kids are some of the most well-behaved kids of any of them they have,
Uh-huh.
any of the friends that are around there. And then they go take the kids to England. The kids behave exactly the same, but they're the worst behaved ones there,
Isn't
right?
that
Because
interesting?
in Italy, it's just more accepted that kids be kids, and you can run around and you can be louder, and that's okay. And people, we found there especially, that they just love having children around.
That's really interesting, and that's a good point. And again, that's why you travel and you experience cultures, and it's not wrong, right? It's not necessarily wrong that that's how Americans are raised. That's just the way it is.
No,
And it's not wrong that that's
yeah,
how it is in Italy. That's just the way it is. And I love for people to travel and really accept that. And once you get that out of your head that my way is not the right way, you can really just
yeah,
embrace it and enjoy it. And like you said, your kids are two different, they're the same kid, but we just accept that they're the bad kids in England or,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
that's
mm. I
yeah.
mean, I echo that 1,000 times, and that's what my book is about. Basically, when I call
Yes.
it like a fish in water, instead of feeling like a fish out of water, how do you adapt to the culture that you're going to? It's not right or wrong. It's right or wrong in that culture, right? How do you fit in to that culture with what you're doing? And that for me is one of the most exciting things about traveling, is finding out what is that way of life, right? How is it different than what I do, and why is it like that as well? What are those reasons behind it? So yes, it's not right or wrong. It's just, if you want your kids to fit in, you do it a certain way. Here in
Yeah.
Spain, kids usually go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, have dinner at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And so if we want to have Spanish friends over for dinner, we don't invite them over at 5:30 or 6 like you
Yeah.
would in the US. They would be like, what are we doing at that time? Like, that's not
Yeah.
dinner time. So of course you have to adapt to it, and vice versa when we're back in the US.
And then I was asking you, I'm like, okay, well, what time do they go to school? And you're like, oh, they start about 9. And I was shocked because, like, wow, you guys are eating dinner that late, and the kids still get to school around the same time as my son starts school at 9 as well. So that was interesting. But
What
again,
time
just
does
the
your
different
son go to
cultures.
sleep?
He goes to bed at 8, and
Yeah,
he's
okay.
almost 9. And he sleeps
Yeah,
that whole time. He sleeps from like 8 to
yeah.
7:30 every morning. He's out like a log. I mean, every
It's
night.
great
So
for you more than anything. It's wonderful. But
yes,
yeah,
I'm
we
not
have
gonna lie,
our
it
friends'
is.
kids, and some of them don't go to bed till 11 o'clock at night and still get up the next morning.
Wow.
And
See, that's
yeah.
fascinating to me. Okay, thank you for kind of letting us know about that. Now let's shift over to you. How did you end up in Barcelona?
Well, lots of luck, I suppose. I feel very lucky to be here for the last 20 years. So, uh, brief history. I grew up in Chicago. I went to undergrad at Illinois Wesleyan University, which is in central Illinois. I studied Spanish and Russian. Those were my two majors. And they told me at school that if I majored in a language, I had to study abroad in a country that spoke that language. And I thought, that's a pretty good punishment. I think I'll
Yeah,
take it.
exactly.
Right.
If I must.
So my first time out of the country, my first time using a passport was when I was 20 and went to St. Petersburg, Russia for 8 weeks for a study abroad there. Totally transformed my way of thinking, my views of the world, my desire to push myself out of my comfort zone, and desire to see more of these cultures that are different than what I was used to. So then I got to do a semester in Madrid after that, fell in love with Spain, knew that not just that I wanted to come back, but I had to come back to Spain. And so as soon as I graduated, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I thought I love languages, I love travel abroad, and my study abroad experiences were transformational for me. So how
Yeah.
maybe I'll help other people do that. So I started working in Chicago with a study abroad company, and it was a great job. But I took the first summer off to go lead a group of high school students with a different program in Spain for 3 weeks. Came back, worked again, took the next summer off to go to Italy for an internship in Milan in a study abroad office. Came back and started my master's degree in Spanish applied linguistics and second language acquisition, and was still working at that study abroad company part-time while I was teaching, while I was studying. Took another summer off and took another group to Spain for 5 weeks. And then the opportunity with that company opened up to go to Barcelona to open their study abroad program. And so I jumped at it. I mean, I
Yeah.
pushed myself in pretty hard, but I jumped at that opportunity and told all my friends and family that I would be gone for 2 years and come back to Chicago. And the 2 years went by, and I was thinking, oh, I really like it here. I'm really finally feeling comfortable, because it took a while. And in fact, after 4 or 5 months, I was ready to quit and go home and just say,
Oh,
why did I
interesting.
do this to
Yeah.
myself? It's too hard. Why did I leave everything I knew and was comfortable with, and 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 go back to Chicago? But I didn't. I stuck through it. I thought, let me do a year. And then a year went by. I thought, okay, let me stick to my original 2 years. And at the end of 2 years is when I first had met Carrie. So that was a good way
Oh,
to
okay.
see how that would turn out. I loved my job. I loved being in Spain. So I thought, let me give it one more year. And then another year and another year, another year. And here we are, 20 years
Oh,
later with a family and a company.
wow. And like it was meant to be, right? You're just lucky. But tell me, so you said your study abroad experiences went really well. What went so well for you? Like, why did you enjoy that experience so much, or those experiences so much?
I think when you study abroad, when you get out, especially for I would say especially for American, but I think for anyone who hasn't traveled very much, your world just opens up and
Yeah.
you start to see there's a huge world out there where I can see the way that people are doing things differently than I do it. I can meet, especially with languages, you can meet all these people that you wouldn't have had a chance to meet otherwise. And people that are wonderful that have ended up being lifetime friends that might have similar interests to you, even though you're a world apart. You can see, not to mention the beautiful buildings and landscapes that you might not get at home. There's something also really challenging to it, to having this different lifestyle. Um, to For example, in Russia, I would run out of toothpaste, and I would think, okay, how do I say toothpaste? I don't know. Let me look up
Yeah.
toothpaste. Um, where do I go to buy it? It's not like there's a Walmart there, especially when I studied abroad in 1996. So where do I go to buy it? How do I say it? You get to the store. How do I even pay for it? The system of payment is different. The currency is different. All of these challenges that you eventually get through and you overcome them. And that is a really rewarding feeling. It's a feeling that I've felt in my travels, and it's what I've seen with thousands of students, is this feeling of independence, of
Mhm.
confidence, of by the end, like throw anything at me, right? I've been through all of these struggles. I've made my way, struggled through different language, different cultures, go into situations where I have no idea how things are going to turn out, and they turn out okay. And I think that is such a peaceful way of looking at life and thinking, okay, I'm not so anxious about what I don't understand or what I don't know, because it'll work out. I'll get through it. I'll meet people, ask people. I don't have to know all the details and everything planned out, and it'll still be a wonderful experience. And so I think that's what I got out of it. In addition to, no better way to learn a language than being
Yeah.
immersed in it.
Immersed in that. Yeah.
Um, Learning about, I mean, say you're in Milan, learning about Italian history or gastronomy in a classroom, and then you go out and you're living that learning right there. You just can't get that in a classroom in the US, no matter
No, and
what.
that makes sense. I was going to say that it's what you were saying previously, that you don't realize how strong you are until you don't have a choice, right? And I think people are stronger than they realize. I think they
Yeah,
let fear kind of determine what they can and can't do, or what they can't do. And then, like, you didn't have a choice. It's either
yeah,
you figured it out, or you weren't going to get from point A to point B. You weren't going to have toothpaste. You weren't going to, you had no choice.
right.
You did it. And you mentioned earlier about me traveling as a single mom,
Mm,
and for other single moms, I wanted to do it. I wasn't going to let it stop me. And I found out how strong I really was. And it was that sense of accomplishment that you're mentioning. It's when
yeah,
you do these things that you didn't know you had in you, you realize, I can conquer the world. Look at me. Look what I did. So I just
absolutely.
wanted to, I completely understand that.
Yeah, it's so
Okay.
empowering.
It
And,
is
and
very empowering, very empowering.
the
So
other
I
thing you
know that,
learn,
oh,
oh,
sorry,
sorry,
go ahead.
yeah, just to add one more, what did you get out of it, is you learn to make mistakes, and that's okay to fail, and that you can learn from failure. And that is a lesson that works no matter where you're living after that. And you fail more, I think, when you're abroad, because you don't understand the culture and what people are, how people react, until you do learn that. But then it's okay to make mistakes, and we don't have to, don't worry so much about it.
Yeah, so true. So true. And I think it's, especially when you're traveling, though, I think you kind of give yourself that grace of, okay, this is my first time doing this. I'm going to make mistakes. But it's like, you're right. This is life. Like, it's okay to make mistakes in life. When you figure things out, when you try new things, when you push your boundaries, you're going to make them. And it's going to be rewarding at the end. You'll get there,
Yeah.
So thanks. That's a great reminder as well. Okay, I do want to switch to Barcelona SAE, because I know that's what all of your experiences led you to founding this company. Um, so tell us, why did you why did you establish Barcelona SAE?
I think you're right. All of my experiences led to this one point. And when I look back on it, and maybe it's just hindsight, it feels like that. Okay, I studied abroad myself. I did this master's degree in Spanish linguistics, ended up in Barcelona. I worked with probably 5 or 6 different study abroad companies at some point, and I got something from all of them. And then I was working in study abroad here in Barcelona. I was also doing intercultural consulting for executives that were traveling from other countries to Spain and helping them adapt. And I just thought, it's time for a program that focuses specifically on this fantastic Mediterranean city, which is Barcelona. Has so much to offer. And I wanted a program that was just the experts in Barcelona. And I also wanted a program that I could do my way, which I'm a study abroad nerd, basically. I love it, as you can probably tell. And so I wanted to start a program that, if I were a student studying abroad again, which I wish I could be, what would I want in a program? What would I want them to do? And so that's what we do now. And we think about a student that's arriving, and we want them to get to know the city better than a local does. We want them to have opportunities to use their language, to meet local people, um, to push themselves out of their comfort zone and learn from that. And so these are all of the aspects that we incorporate into this program. And I thought it was time for that to happen.
And when did you establish Barcelona SAE?
First students came in 2009.
2009. Now
Mhm.
you offer both study abroad and internships. So can you kind of
Correct.
touch on the difference?
Sure. So students can come and study with us for a semester-long program, summer programs, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or 4 months. For a study program, they can do internships year round. So these are unpaid internships because they're academic internships. And so every student that does an internship takes part in this global internships class where they're reflecting on the experience, doing many things that I've talked about or in the book as well to get a professional, cultural, and academic experience. But the internship itself is going to be customized to what they're looking for. So, for example, if they're a marketing student and they're also an athlete and interested in sports, we'll try to find them a sports marketing internship in Barcelona. So they're actually in with the company, oftentimes with small companies or startups where they're working directly with the CEO or the founder or the chief marketing officer. But we do have internships in all areas of business entrepreneurship, but also in engineering, in psychology, and different areas. And study is great as well because they're getting all of their credits transferred back to their home university.
Mm-hmm.
They're not missing a beat in their 4-year trajectory at school, and we're also doing all the cultural aspects with them. So taking them on excursions, guided tours of different parts of the city that they wouldn't find otherwise. Intercambios, which is a language exchange, sort of like speed dating, but speed language exchange. And again, everything else that we throw in to make sure that they are getting to know the city as best as they can. There's no excuses for them not to get to know the city, and then they get to have all those wonderful realizations like we were talking about before about becoming more independent, more confident, um, opening their perspective to see that there's a different way of looking at the world, that the way that they've always done things isn't necessarily the
Yeah.
right way or the only way. And I think that's a wonderful lesson to learn for them. And since we offer study abroad and internships, um, you might ask, well, why do one or the other?
Yeah.
And one answer to that is they don't have to choose. They can come for a semester and study, and then one of their classes is an internship. So they're studying and doing an
Okay.
internship, which we're finding is becoming much more popular these days. I think students feel that to boost their resume, which is important to them, they want this professional experience. And it's true, if you could put on your resume that I did a sports marketing with this company, it looks good. But also, one of the things that we teach our students, and I talk a lot about in the book, is a study abroad experience is giving you a lot of these, what people call soft skills, which makes them sound not important. I think they're the most important. I call them cultural superpowers, which are the confidence, willingness to take risks, all of these aspects that actually employers are looking for these days. And you can get that from studying abroad the right way. And by that, I mean not just hanging out with other Americans if you're American, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, trying new things. There's a way that they can then articulate the experience where either studying abroad or interning abroad gives them this professional experience. It's really, really valuable.
Yeah, and I thank you for, because I was going to ask you that. So thank you for explaining. And I imagine that your organization helps them decide like what might be best for them, whether or not they should probably stick with an internship or probably stick with a study abroad, like before when they're starting to first get the idea in their head.
Yeah, the great thing about the US is that there's a whole network of study abroad offices at colleges and universities. And there's usually a study abroad director with advisors that a student goes in and says, I wanted this, I heard about this study abroad thing, what's it all about? And they would say, here are your options. And tell me a bit more about what you want to study, what you want to get out of it. How does it fit into your 4-year plan and your future plan? And those offices usually know, okay, this student would be great for Barcelona, this student would be great for Prague or Australia or Japan. Um, and they give them those options usually. And a lot more schools these days are actually starting up their own program in another country, partnering
Okay.
with a program like Barcelona SAE. So it's for example, I don't know, University of Chicago program, potentially in a country or in a city. And it's this joint partnership with the programs as well.
No, that's great. Now, even though there might be someone to help them at the university, what do you think students and parents, what should they consider when they're looking for a study abroad program?
Students and parents should think about what it is they want to get out of it, I would say. So, academically, what are the classes that they want to take? Does the program that they're looking into take advantage of the location that they're in? Right. So, if you're taking, does it matter that you're taking a psychology course abroad versus taking it at home? Well, it does if the program utilizes the city and uses across. For me, that's important to have a cross-cultural comparative with the classes in the US. So the academics is part of it for sure. Health and safety, risk management, and looking at the history of the company and how do they rate with that. Talk to other students who've been on the program or the universities to give them advice on it. Cost, but not just sticker price. Look at what's included, because some programs have a cost, but then you look down, you say, but housing's not included in that, or excursions aren't included, you pay extra for it. Whereas others, like Barcelona SAE, we incorporate so much in the program. So there's not extra costs. You're going on the excursions, you're going on the day trips, your housing's included. If you stay with a homestay, you get breakfast and dinner included, right? So I would look at that. I would look at academics, health and safety, costs, and then staff on the ground. Who will they be dealing with there? Who will they be working with? How supportive is that staff? We've definitely found, especially coming out of the pandemic, if we could say we're coming out of it, but we finally have students again, is that students need a little bit more support than they needed before. And again, we're talking about all these challenges. They want, I think students want and need to have that support that's going to allow them to take risks, go out of their comfort zone. Because if you don't feel comfortable and supported, you probably won't do that. And that's a real shame. And I think they would be missing out on a lot of the experience there.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And I know you kind of touched on it, but why should, if it's available in their university, why should students consider partnering with or doing the study abroad program with Barcelona SAE?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I think our staff is fantastic. We've got an incredible team that's made up of local people from Barcelona, other Spanish people, Americans like me that have been living for a long time in Spain. Our staff in the US, our advisors are there, and everybody on the team is just so passionate about study abroad and the experience, because all of us have done it and what it means, and we live to get the students to have that experience as well. And so we do things differently. That's what our partners say about us, is we're a different type of program. And even as when I started in 2009, it was just me with a group of 11 students. And I did everything with those students. I knew all about them. I knew all about their boyfriends or girlfriends. I knew their studies. I knew their struggles. And as we've grown, I didn't want to lose that feeling. I didn't want our students to just feel like a number. And so we have a big staff, and each staff is a cultural mentor to a small group of 10 to 12 students. And so we maintain that feeling of a small group, and the cultural mentor would take them out for coffees at the beginning, talk about their goals, talk about what their fears and expectations are, meet them midway through, see how they're doing with that. Anytime they got a question, they come in and talk to them. We guide them through, get them to reflect on their experiences, go on excursions with them. And so I don't know of other programs that do something like that. And then just the nuts and bolts is we have lots of options. Even though we're in one city, there are a lot of academic options for students to take, internships that they could take. But I would say it goes down to the team and our passion for helping students have this experience.
And then if a student was interested, they have to go through the program at school, or can they contact you directly to get information? Like, what's the best way to get more information about joining Barcelona SAE?
I would say they should start with their study abroad office and talk to them and make sure that they work with us. I mean, there's lots of colleges and universities out there. We don't work with all of them, although we work with lots of them. And go to our website, barcelonasae.com, and go in maybe to the study abroad office with a reason, because Barcelona is a very popular city. It's a
Mhm.
very popular city, but what a study abroad office doesn't want to hear is, I want to go to Barcelona because it sounds like a cool city,
Okay.
right? They want to know, I want to go to Barcelona SAE because I want to take this cross-cultural psychology class, and I want to take a class about Dali, and I want to do a homestay, and I know they do homestays, and it's an affordable program, and it fits with my budget. Hey, you've done your research. Another aspect about Barcelona SAE that sets us apart is our diversity initiatives called Todos meaning everyone. And we've been working really hard on this. It's actually won an award last year earlier this year for recognition of our diversity initiatives. And so, I,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, we're really, really proud of it. It goes beyond just having a student come, good, we got another student, go home. No, there's such an opportunity for this intercultural awareness, for learning that people are different than we are, and we shouldn't be afraid of those differences. We should be seeking out those differences and learning about people that are different. Anyway, I could go on about this forever, but I won't.
No, that's okay. I think it's important because honestly, it's something that, like, I think it's great, but I wouldn't know where to start. I hope when my son gets older, it's something he'll consider. But I wouldn't know where to start. So that's why I'm glad you're providing this information, because I know there's a lot of parents out there like me that don't. Now, before we kind of leave that, I know, like as you mentioned, Barcelona SAE is partnered with about 100 universities. I think you had told me previously, correct?
hmm Yeah. And so, sorry, to get back to your other question, even if we're not partnered, it doesn't mean that they can't come with us. There's still a chance that they could go in and say, I saw this Barcelona SAE program. Here's the reasons I like it. And then sometimes they just say, okay, great. Sometimes they say there's an appeal process. Um, so it's definitely worth asking. And you know what? If they go in and say, we don't work with Barcelona SAE, but you can go study abroad with this other program, awesome. I mean, I'm for everyone being able to do this however they can.
But you also mentioned that by appeal, like there is a good chance, because many of the universities you became affiliates with them just because students had appealed to go to Barcelona SAE, correct?
Right, right. So maybe they
Yeah.
found out about us because of that. Yeah,
Yeah. So I don't
especially at
want
the
to
beginning.
discourage people because it does happen, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's a little bit scary, of course, if people haven't traveled before, but hey, hundreds of thousands of students are doing it right now. And again, if that support network is there, just do it. I've never talked to a student or an adult who studied abroad and regretted studying abroad.
Yeah,
Never,
that's true.
ever, ever. The only regret I hear, and it's a very common regret, is someone who went through college and didn't study abroad,
Yeah.
because that's a great time to do it. We actually had a student this summer who came and had a really hard time, and she ended up having to go home after about 7 days because she couldn't handle all the pressure. Now, it doesn't happen often. It's maybe 1% of our students, and she is now an ambassador for us and ambassador for study abroad. She's like, I'm going to go back next chance I get. I'm going to go back. It wasn't the right time for me. She's writing. It was a great experience, even though it was really hard for her. But she said it was such a great experience. Opened my eyes. Now I realize I can do it, and I want to go back and do it again.
That's great. Wow. That's good for her for going back though, too, and realizing, wait a minute, I did like this. It was just scary, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
No, and that kind of leads us to your book, right? Like a fish
yeah.
in water, how to grow abroad when you go abroad. So, let's talk about your book. There it is. There you
For the
go.
for those people
What
watching.
inspired you
Yeah,
to write your book? I mean, I think you pretty much said it, but let's just kind of.
yeah. Well, hopefully you could feel my passion for that topic as I talk about it. And again, it's been my professional life for 25 years. As soon as I graduated from college, I've been working in this field, and because I had the experiences myself studying abroad, it's such a big part of my life, and I've really worked in all the different aspects of it. And for the last 20 years, been working with students on site, and I've seen so many of them get transformed by it and gain that confidence and independence and all those cultural superpowers that we're talking about. I've also seen some, unfortunately, who just skim across the surface and spend all the time with Americans in a bubble. Don't take advantage of the opportunities to learn the language. And I think it's a real shame when that happens. And so I only work with our students in Barcelona, but I thought it was time to try to help or guide or coach students that are going anywhere around the world, mostly from the US, but then out, to have a playbook before they even go abroad, while they're in country, and then when they get home, to say, how can I maximize this experience? How can I get the most out of it? And then and so I've been writing a newsletter for about 5 or 6 years about increasing tips for increasing cultural awareness. And that goes out to study abroad offices, faculty, advisors, with little activities that either I've created or I've borrowed from somebody else. And many people along the way have said, well, you should put this into a book. And I do workshops for our students all the time and at professional conferences. And it just lent itself, I think, to a guide. And it really doesn't exist right now. There's no other real guide for students that is taking them from the beginning to the end. And so I thought, when COVID hit and students weren't allowed to come to Spain anymore, we obviously, our work changed and I didn't have as much going on. And I thought, if I'm ever going to do it, I have to do it now. So I just put my head down and spent lots and lots of hours taking bits and pieces from what I had, working with a great company that guided me through it and coached me through the book writing process, edited it, published it. And I thought, hopefully it will help some other students through the ups and downs, help them to change their mindset about failure, about seeing the opportunities everywhere, even in the hard times. There's a chapter in there about how to best learn a language, no matter where they are. There's a chapter about food and culture, which is a course I used to teach. So I also taught study abroad students different culture classes, and what you can learn about different cultures through food. And the other thing we haven't quite mentioned yet is how much you learn about yourself when you travel abroad. I say to people that you learn as much about yourself as you do about the culture that you're going to. That's true. Because there's so many things that make you stop and say, like, why are they doing that? And then you have the fun question afterwards, say, well, why do I do things the way that I do it? Why does that stick out to me?
But that's also an important question to ask, though, Rich, because not everybody does. I think it's important because a lot of people are too busy saying, why do they do that? Not understanding, not stopping to say, wait a minute, why do I do that?
Absolutely. And it's the fun part. It's the part that I love. So I use a metaphor of the iceberg, which everybody uses, but I think in this case, it really is easy to understand that above the water, when you're abroad, you see things, you see things that are different and stand out to you. But then you have to dive below the water to ask, what are the values and beliefs that are manifesting in these behaviors? And that for me is the fascinating part. And so one example I talk about is when I was a student in Madrid and I'd met a girl in one of my classes, and we were just walking home from class, and we saw two people making out in the street, like two young people making out. And I said, like, oh, look at that PDA. And she said, what's PDA? And I said, well, it's public displays of affection. And she said, yeah. And I was like, well, don't you think they should get a room or something? And she said, why? And I was my mind was blown that something that I saw so clearly as that's wrong. They shouldn't be, making out in the street. That's a private thing. To her was absolutely fine. No issue whatsoever. And so I think, well, why do I think that? Why do I think that should be private? And then it's interesting to think why she doesn't. There are all kinds of reasons for it. And is that times 1,000 when you're abroad, right? Every little thing. I love what I say to iceberg it. To iceberg is observe it and then figure out what are those values and beliefs that drive it. That for me is so interesting. And you learn so much about yourself when you do that.
But I love that you like to learn about yourself. And like I said, I think that's what more and more, especially Americans, need to do when they travel, instead of just question with that, what's wrong with them mentality more, it's not wrong. And that's interesting. Why do I do what I do? And it's, one you make me think of, or not anything you said, but just in particular, one that comes to mind is nudity. I know that that's different in
Yeah.
other countries than it is in America. And that's something that's like, huh, I wonder why we're like that so much. You don't, it's a taboo, which is really
Right.
interesting. But like, I know European countries, it's very different. Um,
Right.
so it's
Well, we
just,
have, yeah, and in Spain, the beaches are topless beaches
yeah.
here. And so very shocking to me when I first got here, and not so much now after all this time. But I remember an American girlfriend had came and she was talking to her mom on the phone and said, "Oh, we were at the beaches and they're topless beaches." And her mom said, "Well, you're not going to do that, are you? You're not going to lower yourself to that
Oh, wow.
standard." And you think, well, so that's her perspective, the way of coming
Yeah.
at it, and it's understandable from where she comes from and what she's lived. But somebody here who's grown up with it, it's like it's not a big deal at all, and it's not a lower standard at all. So, like we said before, who's right and who's wrong? Well, it's not right or wrong. It's the context that you're in that you have to see if you fit in or don't fit in by what you do.
Yeah. And it depends on if you want to embrace the culture or just say my way is the right way and just, you know,
Yeah. Well, with the executives that I work with in the consulting, if when they come with that attitude of my way is the right way, coming from, I don't know, Poland or wherever they're coming from, it doesn't work out. It never works out.
yep.
They might have some better ideas of, I don't know, business in general, but without understanding the communication patterns, the I don't know, personal distance issues of personal distance and concept of time of Spain, it's not going to work out because
Yeah.
it works really well there, but in this context here, it's not going to work unless it's adapt to it. So one of the chapters is called um, "You have to adapt to the culture. The culture is not going to adapt to you." And I've seen it over and over.
Well, which reminds me with your book. So your book, I want to make sure everyone knows it's not just for anybody who wants to come to Spain.
Correct. Yeah, I've made it general on purpose so that any student studying abroad going anywhere has activities. So there's activities throughout the book that guide them through and say, okay, now maybe go to a cafe and just observe nonverbal communication for half an hour and write down what you see. And then there's a bit of information about nonverbal communication that's different in different cultures. An example, so my wife is from England, and in England, if you put two fingers up like this, and for people that can't see me, my palm is facing me, I'm holding two fingers, like saying two. That's like putting up the middle finger in England,
Oh, interesting.
right? And so it's just, again, one of many examples of what we know to be true is not true in different contexts. So they'll have activities like that, then they'll go over it. An activity I call 1 hour ambassador, where they have to find a local, and I have a series of questions to ask that person, and they're mainly questions about everyday life. So especially for a student, find another student. Uh, and this comes from when Carrie and I were in Estonia on a tour. We met one of the tour guides, and we were talking to her, and just asked her questions like, "Hey, what do you do on the weekends with your friends? Are you religious? What kind of food do you eat?" And in an hour, we found out so much information. Like fell in love with Estonia because we met
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
and thought, wow, especially a lot of Americans that have this life timeline of I'm going to graduate from college at 22. I'm going to get my first job so that I can
Yep.
find, a partner and get married and have my kid by this age and have my car. Like that is usually thrown out the window in other cultures. A lot of Australians go and before they start work, they take a year off to travel around the
Yeah.
world. And for a lot of Americans, that's like, why are you wasting a year of your life to do that? It's what is wasting towards what, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Australians will say, why are you wasting this opportunity?
Yeah.
And so again, different ways of looking at it, which I think is really enriching.
So it sounds like, I mean, your book is obviously it's how to grow abroad when you go abroad, but it's not just I feel like people who are not just studying abroad would benefit from your book. I feel like anybody who wants to go to maybe stay in another country for a little bit would really benefit from your book. I mean, honestly, I feel like anybody, because I'm listening to activities you have, and I'm like, that would have been really interesting, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't really expecting that, but so many people have said it after the book has come out. I mean, I wrote it for a study abroad student going abroad, but for example, one of our alumni moved from South Florida to got a job in New York City, and she's using the activities in the book just for that, adapting to a
Oh,
culture of New York
interesting.
City
Okay.
as different. Other people have said even if you're going to a new job, right? It's because culture is all around us. Culture is, sorry, I don't want to get too professorial here, but one of the definitions I use is culture is what we do around here now, which is very vague, but it's true. It's how people are acting and why they're acting the way that they are. And so, if you went to go work in Texas, for example, and you're not used to culture there, you're going to have adapting to do, right? And there's different communication styles. There's different words that you're going to have to learn. There's different views of time, right? All that stuff, even within a domestic environment, not to mention going abroad. So when we're going leaping from one culture to another, and trying to not feel like a fish out of water, then what are the activities? And so, yeah, the book is full of activities and then reflection on those, and then stories and mishaps from my experiences, that mistakes that I've made, and trying to get people in the right mindset that it's okay to fail, learn from the failure, and be able to laugh at it. And then the last two chapters are all about coming home. So, especially for students, how do they put this experience on a resume? How do they use the experience to help them get a job? How do they talk about it and articulate it in a job interview? Instead of just saying, oh, it was great, it was the best time of my life. That's not going to get them a job. Nobody cares about that. But they can talk about all of these superpowers that they've gained and strengthened while they've been abroad.
No, that's great. And I want to, because I wanted to ask you one more question before we wrap it up, but how do people get your book?
They can go to my website, which is fishinwaterbook.com, or get it on Amazon. It's on Amazon. If they look up the title and my name, they'll be able to find it there. Um, at the website, you can find all the different chapters and a little bit about what's happening in each chapter, what you get there, so you get an idea of it.
Great. Okay. Now, I did want to ask you a little bit, just kind of going back to life there, because as an American and you live in a completely different country, what do you love about living in Barcelona?
Wow. If you've ever been to Barcelona, you would feel the energy and the life that's here. And I've never been in any city before where so many people, upon arrival or within the first day, say, I need to come back here. I need to spend more time here. It's, um, there's the food. That's incredible. There's the life. People are out on the street at all times of day and night. People are laid back. And again, that's compared to my experience in the US, feeling laid back and not so rushing around all the time. You know, for example, take an hour for lunch, or on the weekends, take 2 or 3 hours for lunch. Barcelona offers the sea, the beach, the mountains. In no time, you're out and you're in forests. You've got, for me, I love the different languages. That you've got the architecture, the Gaudi architecture. It's like you're walking around in a museum. The weather is great, especially compared to Chicago in the wintertime. It was rough, and here the winters are pretty mild comparatively. It's
I know
there's
one
just
thing you
something to
mentioned, and I'm going to make sure to remind you, is that the what I loved was emphasis on being a kid to be a kid.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You mean if as an adult coming here, you feel like you
No, that
can
like your kids, that's one thing you've noticed that you love about it,
yes.
is that emphasis on them being able to be kids.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we don't have the when I talk to parents, other parents sometimes, and it feels very competitive already at an early age about the extracurricular activities that they're doing, the sports that they're in, the tutoring that they're doing. Are they in the best kindergarten already? And here, I don't get that feeling at all. And kids have longer recess times, and they play a lot more, and um, it just seems like there's not that pressure for kids to be growing up really quickly. that can be kids.
Yeah, I know you said you really like that part of it. Okay, before you leave, what advice do you have for parents considering moving abroad?
Parents considering moving abroad, I would say be prepared for it to be different, right? I know that's not very profound, but things will be different, and embrace those differences and look at it as a way of becoming more flexible, seeing things from different perspectives. It's going to help you. Um, it's going to make it a lot easier. I've worked with lots of people that if they're really rigid and they think that my way of doing things is the only way or the best way, it makes it very hard. First of all, you go to another culture and say that, and people obviously don't like it, right? And even if you just think it without saying it, it makes it really hard to see the other side. And it's easy for me to say this, and even I struggle with it sometimes in Spanish culture still. Um, I spent a good amount of my life in the US, and so there's certain things that I definitely still like better about how the US does things, and other things I like better about here. But you have to adapt to it. So I would say it's an amazing opportunity for parents, for kids to move abroad, but be ready for it. Get the kids ready for it. Get them excited for it. Um, I haven't talked to many families that have regretted it, right, going abroad, and I think that the opportunities are incredible for it. So a friend of mine who I think you might know soon, Sheila Maloney, wrote this
Yep.
book about family gap year and how she took her family from Chicago and spent a year living abroad in Brazil. And uh, amazing story and so inspiring. And I think more people can do it. I also just listened to a podcast about a couple that moved to Denmark as supposedly as one of the happiest countries, and it took them a while, but they ended up shifted their lifestyle, shifted the way of seeing things, and also became very happy and happier than where they were. Um, but yeah, I've worked with a lot of people that have had a hard time, and the ones that have had a hardest time are the most rigid and not open to these new experiences. Even if I was working with one woman from here going to work in Silicon Valley, and she was so excited to go to the US, and Silicon Valley is her dream. But wow, she had a lot of trouble still. It's because it's not a dream, and it's not like anything in life. It's not the highlight reel that you see in other people's Instagram feeds and Facebook. It's got its challenges, but the mentality has to shift to see those challenges as part of the best parts of it, because you get through it, and then, like we said before, you can do anything after that.
Yeah, it's worth it if you just hang in there. It's going to be different. It's a culture shock. Most people aren't prepared for it, but just hang in there and it'll be worth it.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And then you did mention Sheila. Sheila will be on our show. She will be
Great.
joining us. So we will definitely get into her book. So thank you for that introduction, because I'm excited to have her on as well. But I want to thank you. Thank you very much for coming onto the show, for telling us about Barcelona SAE. I hope everybody who is interested in studying abroad will at least check it out. And your book, of course. Again, that's Rich Kurtzman, Like a Fish in Water, How to Grow Abroad When You Go Abroad. Rich, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Erica. It's been great.